In this video, we'll talk about minor key signatures, the relationship with major key signatures in an example, relative and parallel keys, also closely related, distantly related keys, and we'll take a look at the complete circle of fifths. At this point, we understand how the circle of fifths works for both major and minor keys. We know what key signatures are and what purpose they serve. So the same rationale we've been applying for major key signatures and everything else that is related to the circle of fifths will apply here as well for minor keys. So let's begin. These are the key signatures of major keys. For the sake of review, let's talk about a few things about them. These key signatures feature the accidentals that will always be applicable to whatever key a piece is being played in. So G major, for example, the first one here that is a transposition up by a perfect fifth from C major. G major then has one sharp in its key signature, F sharp. You can see that both in the treble clef and in the bass clef, because that's the accidental that the scale of G major requires. Of course, over the course of actual music, sometimes a composer will require an F natural instead of that F sharp, but the status quo in a piece that is in G major is to have F always be F sharp. So the key signature serves that purpose, to indicate that every time we play or sing an F, it'll be an F sharp instead because of the key we're playing this in or singing this in. You will remember that the accidentals in the key signatures, they follow the order that they appeared in the circle of fifths, and that they must be placed on specific lines and spaces, right? We've talked about this as being handed down by tradition. They have appropriate places to be featured in, the accidentals. Now let's take a look at minor key signatures. Do you see the similarities? The names of the keys change, right? Because we start in A minor and start transposing up and down from A minor instead of C major. But the key signatures are exactly the same. They happen in the same order. The accidentals in them also happen in the same order and in the same place, right? They have the proper placement. Again, all of this according to the circle of fifths, etc. So basically, once we know the key signatures for major keys, we already know the key signatures for minor keys and vice versa. Maybe this was self-evident from the fact that the accidentals in the circle of fifths were the same for both major keys and minor keys, right? We saw previously that this inside of the circle of fifths is exactly the same what the accidentals are and their order for both minor keys and major keys. So maybe that was self-evident, but I think it helps to actually see on a graph here that the key signatures are the same and that their order are the same, the order of the accidentals, their placement, etc. Everything is the same, just the scales. The names of the scales are different. Here's a graph showing all minor key signatures in coordination with the circle of fifths. We've seen something similar in relation to major keys in the circle of fifths before. Now, here's the graph of graphs, the complete circle of fifths, including all major and minor keys, their accidentals, and their key signatures. On the outside, represented by uppercase letters in bold, you have all 15 major keys. On the inside of the bigger circle, right, the outside, more like an oval here, the bigger oval outside. On the inside here, in lowercase letters, in bold, you have all 15 minor keys. Right, so you have major keys on the outside. On the first layer here, you have minor keys in bold. And on the inside of the concentric circle, you have the new accidentals that pertain to each of these keys. Because the accidentals happen in the same order, right? We can put them in reference to both a major and a minor key. Now, this is my version of the circle of fifths. If you look up circle of fifths online, that features both major and minor keys with the accidentals, you may find something slightly different. For example, minor keys on the inside of the concentric circle instead of the outside. And instead of the specific accidentals that are new to those keys, you'll have the number of accidentals, like 1, 2, 3, 4. But the idea is basically the same. If this looks scary to you, as I've said before, don't worry too much. It looks scary basically for everybody, even seasoned professional musicians. But also there's something to it, right? That the whole thing looks more than the sum of its parts. But in this case, it isn't really. If you understand the logic behind the circle of fifths, then I think that the circle of fifths is not as hard and it can be a useful and trustworthy tool, right? Unless you have to memorize it for a test, you really don't have to memorize it. You can use it as a reference. For example, if you need to know what is the minor key with 5 flats, right? So you start on A, then you have a key with 1 flat, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the minor key will happen to be B flat minor, right, with 5 flats. That's the kind of thing I think the circle of fifths is most useful for us to understand how it works, but then don't feel the pressure of memorizing it entirely. Unless you really deal with it on a day-to-day basis, chances are you won't memorize or you won't have to, but to use it as a reference tool. From the complete circle of fifths, we can establish 4 relationships between different keys. This is a topic that will become much more relevant when we talk about harmony, how keys and scales are actually applied in music, that we listen to. But I feel that these are concepts that are worth introducing at this point, now that we have seen how the complete circle of fifths looks like. The relationships are the following, and we'll see examples of them in the circle of fifths very shortly. 1. Relative keys. Relative keys are keys that have different modes, meaning one is major and the other is minor. They have different tonics, meaning they have different names, right? They start on different notes, but they have the same key signature. So if you think of C major and A minor, those are scales or keys that do not use any accidentals, right? Because they have quote-unquote the same key signature, but different modes. One is major, the other is minor. Different tonics. One is C, the other is A. Because they share the same key signature, they're called relative keys. This is common parlance in music. You will oftentimes hear about this in music theory classes and even sometimes in more informal settings, relative keys. They have a special relationship, relative keys, which once again will become much more relevant when we talk about harmony in the near future. Parallel keys are keys that have different modes. One is major, the other is minor, but they have the same tonic, and therefore they will have different key signatures. So these are scales that, or keys that have the same name or start with the same note, but then one is major and the other is minor, like C major and C minor, right? So knowing the difference there between relative and parallel is a little bit important. Closely related keys are groups of 6 keys, which comprise any key, its relative key, its neighbors, and their relative keys. So if you look, and we'll do so in a second, at C major, that'll be C major, A minor, its relative key. The neighbors are G major and F major, and their relative keys are E minor and D minor. These are very important keys that are related in a way that makes them be featured often together in music in a variety of contexts. And distantly related keys, or also often called distant keys, are any non-adjacent keys in the circle of fifths, right? So C major and E major, for example, they're quite distant. Keys with different modes then, like we've just mentioned, one major and one minor, but with the same key signature, are called relative keys. So you can see clearly that the circle of fifths is really useful in showing you what the relative keys are. One key signature, 2 different keys, 2 different modes. Closely related keys are those groups of 6 keys that comprise a key, its relative key, its neighbors, and their relative keys. Now the graph here looks very cluttered, actually kind of beautiful, kind of like a transcendental flower of sorts. But this maybe isn't as useful. So let me dial back so I can show you just one group of closely related keys. There, at the top. So look at C major, its relative key is A minor, its neighbors are G major, F major, their relative keys E minor and D minor. These are the 6 closely related keys, or rather the 5 closely related keys to C major, right? Comprising then a group of 6 keys. If you would do the same for starting on G major, for example, you'd have G major, E minor, C major, A minor, D major, B minor, and so on and so forth. Notice that anything that does not fall in here is distantly related to C major, and that parallel keys like C major and C minor are always distantly related, or simply distant keys. One last comment. We have already established that the key signatures refer to natural minor scales, right? Accidentals that pertain to the harmonic minor with a raised 7th scale degree, and the melodic minor, which raises both 6th and the 7th scale degrees, do not show in the key signature. Rather, they appear in the course of music as composers need to use them, or want to use them, really. Here's an example. Let's cement that idea with an example. This is Greensleeves. We have seen it previously, and we've seen that it utilizes all 3 versions of the minor scale: the natural minor, the harmonic minor, and the melodic minor. These first 2 bars, 2 full bars here, you have the natural minor, right? We have here, in this case, we're in G minor. You can see by the key signature of 2 flats. And this F here is a subtonic, right? We have an F here at the bass clef as well. And that subtonic is scale degree 7, a whole tone away from tonic, from G. So these first 2 bars are using the natural minor scale, and then we have a parallel of that here, and bars 5 and 6 also using the natural minor scale. Bars 3 and 4 are using F sharp, raised 7th scale degree, and that is the harmonic minor scale. And then lastly here on bar 7, we have both F sharp and E natural, right? E natural, you'll remember from the key signature, E typically is E flat, so E natural is that raised 6th scale degree. So in bar 7, we're using the melodic minor scale. So you can see here that these accidentals that pertain to the harmonic and melodic minor variants of G minor do not appear in the key signature. They are written individually in the course of music. Just for the sake of remembering, here's how it sounds like. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. There's not much else to be said about minor key signatures. In our next video, we'll talk about intervals, interval qualities, and we'll look at 4 examples of different intervals: the 2nd, the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th.